Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex stories, break them down, and give you the insights you really need. Today, we're jumping into this whirlwind of allegations, the legal battles surrounding Sean Diddy Combs, a huge figure in hip-hop, obviously. You've probably seen the headlines, you've heard the snippets everywhere, but what we want to do today is cut through all that noise. We're going to unpack the layers here, really look at the legal landscape, and some of the, frankly, surprising details coming out of the courtroom. This isn't just celebrity stuff. It's serious legal drama.
Absolutely. And, what's really fascinating, legally speaking, is how federal law is being used, specifically racketeering charges. You usually hear RICO in relation to like organized crime, the mafia,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But we've seen this playbook before. Think Keith Raniere from NXIVM or R. Kelly. The goal isn't just prosecuting one specific act. It's about trying to dismantle what the prosecution alleges is an entire criminal enterprise. So we're going to explore how they're connecting all these dots, these seemingly separate events over many years to build their case. And, just as important, how the defense is pushing back, challenging those connections. It raises huge questions about power, about consent, especially in the entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm. And we've gathered a lot of material for this deep dive. We've got court documents, investigative reports, direct testimonies. It paints a really comprehensive picture, sometimes pretty unsettling. Our mission really is to look at the key allegations from all sides, understand the strategies, prosecution, and defense, and think about the wider impact of this really high-stakes trial. So what does it all mean for someone who is, one of the most powerful people in entertainment? Let's unpack it.
The initial shockwaves, Cassie's lawsuit, and the floodgates.
Okay, so you probably remember things really blowing up, publicly anyway, back in November 2023. That was the bombshell lawsuit. It was filed by his former girlfriend, the singer Cassie Ventura. Cassandra Ventura is her full name. And look, this wasn't just some standard civil claim. The allegations in it were graphic, really disturbing. She accused Combs of years of sexual assault, physical abuse, and, this was shocking. Claims he forced her into sex acts with male sex workers while he watched and filmed. It wasn't a small story. It was like a tidal wave that brought all this into the, mainstream conversation.
Right. And that immediately made people ask, okay, why now? After all this time, why was Cassie coming forward then? And the answer really lies with a specific law in New York, the Adult Survivors Act. It was passed in 2022.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this law was crucial. It allowed this unique one-year window, basically November 22 to November 23. And it allowed victims of sexual assault to sue their alleged abusers, even if the normal statute of limitations was long gone.
Right, that window was closing.
Exactly. Cassie's lawsuit was filed November 23rd, literally hours before that window slammed shut. So many people have called it the North Star in this whole legal saga. The timing was just absolutely critical. It acted like this powerful signal that, well, as we saw pretty quickly, opened the floodgates for other people who maybe felt they couldn't sue before or were just too scared. It really changed the game for alleged victims.
And then this is where it gets really unusual, right? Cassie's lawsuit settles out of court, undisclosed amount. And it happens just one day after it was filed, like incredibly fast.
Yeah, lightning speed.
Diddy's lawyer, of course, immediately put out a statement saying the settlement doesn't mean he admits anything, maintains his innocence completely. But still, settling that fast within 24 hours, it definitely got people talking, raised a lot of eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
People asking why settle so quickly if the claims have absolutely no merit, especially given how severe they were. It sent a message, didn't it? Regardless of the official denials.
It certainly seemed to. And that message, whatever it was, appeared to, embolden others. A lot of others. Within just weeks of Cassie's lawsuit and that super quick settlement, we started seeing this cascade of new civil suits against Diddy.
Wow.
Yeah, and many of these allegations went way back, decades, some to the early 1990s, like accusations from Joy Dickerson-Neal. She alleged she was drugged, sexually assaulted, filmed without consent back in 91. She was a college student then. Another woman, Liza Gardner, claimed rape, choking, being forced to track down a friend, also in 91. She said Diddy was worried about what her friend might say. So these weren't just vague claims. They were detailed accounts piling up fast.
And when you look at the pattern, all these allegations together, it's chilling. You're hearing claims of rape, drug-facilitated sexual assault, and it's hard to even say child sexual abuse. Alleged victims as young as 10 years old at the time.
Just awful.
By mid-February 2025, so just a few months after Cassie's suit, there were over 50 civil lawsuits filed against Holmes. Yeah, so this wasn't just a couple of isolated things you could maybe dismiss. It quickly looked like a widespread, pervasive pattern of accusations. Multiple people, different decades, different places, alleging a systematic pattern.
Which leads to that really tough question, right? Why were people silent for so long? And the sources we looked at, they consistently point to this culture of silence that allegedly surrounded powerful men like Diddy, especially in entertainment. Huge money, huge influence.
Yeah, the power dynamic.
Exactly. People were reportedly terrified, or maybe sometimes complicit. Victims, former employees, they worried about being blackballed, losing their careers, financial ruin. It really highlights this massive power imbalance Diddy allegedly had over people around him, employees, artists trying to make it. This fear, this professional fear, plus alleged threats, kept people quiet for years, sometimes decades. It created an environment where, if the allegations are true, abuse could just continue unchecked.
And then May 2024, everything changes again, for a lot of people watching anyway. CNN gets and releases that surveillance video from March 2016.
The hotel video.
Yeah, the hotel hallway video. It appears to show Combs violently assaulting Cassie, chasing her, kicking her, dragging her. For anyone who maybe doubted the claims before, thought it was just words on paper, easily settled. Seeing that on video, it was undeniable for many. A total game changer. That visual evidence, seeing the physical violence happen, it just had this visceral impact. Something written claims maybe couldn't achieve in the same way. Stark visual corroboration.
And what's fascinating there is how fast the public reacted. And then Diddy's apology, which was pretty uncharacteristic for him up to that point. He'd been denying everything, asserting innocence for months. Then, days after the video drops, he posts his own video on Instagram. Says his behavior was inexcusable, takes full responsibility.
Right, I remember that.
It was a huge public concession. Now, fast forward to the trial. The defense is trying to frame that and other past incidents as maybe regrettable domestic issues. Separate from the big federal charges he's facing now, They keep saying his kinky sex or swinger lifestyle was consensual.
Despite the video showing clear violence.
Right. But that apology back in May 2024, that was a major shift in his public messaging at the time.
The core allegations, freak-offs, and the criminal enterprise.
Okay, so let's get into the core of the prosecution's case now. And a lot of the civil suits, too. These events called freak-offs. The actual federal indictment uses that term. It describes them as, let me get this right, elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded.
Yeah, pretty explicit description in the legal documents.
They were also called things like hotel nights, wild king nights, or just debauchery. And the key point, according to the allegations, is that these weren't spontaneous parties.
No, not at all. If you look at the bigger picture the prosecution is painting, they contend these were highly organized, systematic events. Prosecutors allege Combs deliberately induced female victims and also male sex workers into these performances, fueled by drugs and sometimes lasting not just hours, but for days.
Days.
Yeah, days on end. Victims were allegedly given controlled substances, things like ecstasy, GHB, ketamine, coke, meth, oxycodone. And the alleged purpose, prosecutors say, was to keep them obedient and compliant. Incapacitated, essentially. And on top of that, allegedly subjected to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse to make sure they participated or kept participating. It really points towards a very systematic approach. Coercion, control, designed to manipulate people into performing against their will, or when they couldn't truly consent.
So how did these things even happen? Facilitated, I mean.
Yeah.
If they were so elaborate, lasted for days.
Well, the sources detail how Combs's associates allegedly played really key roles, booking entire hotel suites, sometimes for days at a time, actively recruiting sex workers, distributing those drugs we mentioned.
There's staff involvement.
Significant alleged staff involvement. There were claims from former employees about arranging travel for victims, even incredibly organizing 5E fluids.
5E fluids to recover.
To help people recover from these prolonged events. That's the allegation. One former employee testified specifically about being told to supply drugs, sex toys, and then, kind of horrifyingly, clean up afterwards. Bodily fluids, dispose of evidence like used condoms, drug stuff. After these Wild King nights, the level of alleged organization, the number of staff supposedly involved, it really suggests a deliberate, structured operation, not just random parties gone wild.
Okay, so that brings us to the federal charges. How do these disturbing allegations translate into that?
Right. September 2024, that's when the landscape totally shifted. Combs is arrested, indicted on federal charges. sex trafficking and racketeering. Racketeering, the RCO Act. Racketeer influenced and corrupt organization.
Mob charge.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very serious charge.
Yeah.
Typically used, like we said, for dismantling organized crime groups. And it carries a potential life sentence. Life. Applying it here to a music mogul shows the prosecution really views his alleged activities as a structured, long-running criminal enterprise, operating beyond just individual bad acts. It's a potential game changer for these kinds of cases against powerful people.
So what does the indictment actually allege, the Iveco part?
It lays out this picture, alleging that between 2008 and 2024, so a 16-year span, Combs led a racketeering conspiracy, and that this conspiracy engaged in sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, obstruction of justice, among other crimes.
That's a lot.
It is. It paints this really chilling narrative. Not just isolated incidents, but a sprawling, long-term criminal enterprise, suggesting his business empire, his inner circle, were allegedly used to facilitate crimes and then cover them up, like the head of a sophisticated criminal network.
Okay, so legally, how do they prove that? Racketeering sounds complicated.
It is, but here's what's fascinating about the legal strategy.
Yeah.
The use of predicate offenses. To get a racket conviction, they don't actually have to prove every single one of those crimes happened. They only need to establish that 2 of those underlying predicate acts took place, and that at least one other person in his alleged organization helped him commit them.
It's just 2.
Just 2, within the pattern of the enterprise. The indictment lists 8 specific predicate offenses they're alleging against Diddy: sex trafficking, bribery, forced labor, witness tampering, transportation to engage in prostitution, kidnapping, arson, and drug distribution.
Right.
This approach, it's like a modular strategy. It gives the prosecution a big advantage. Think of it like throwing darts. They don't need every dart to hit the bullseye. They just need enough hits, proving at least 2 of those predicate acts to show that consistent pattern of criminal activity within the alleged enterprise.
Okay, that makes sense.
And some predicate acts might be easier to prove than others. For example, sex trafficking itself, if proven by force, fraud, or coercion, carries a mandatory minimum of 15 years up to life. That's a high bar. But another predicate act listed is transportation to engage in prostitution, often falls under the Mann Act. That can carry up to 10 years. And crucially, the Mann Act, which is about moving people across state lines for immoral purposes, doesn't always require proof of force or fraud, just that the transportation was for prostitution.
So potentially an easier path to proving one of the necessary acts.
Potentially. It broadens their chances of getting that overall racketeering conviction, even if they struggle to prove, say, forced trafficking for every single alleged victim. It's a powerful tool.
Witnesses, evidence, and conflicting narratives.
All right, let's talk about the trial itself. Jury selection started May 2025, and there have been some really compelling witnesses, adding layer upon layer to the story. Cassie herself, Cassandra Ventura, she testified for several days, gave this deeply personal, pretty harrowing account, described drug-dazed marathon sex sessions, said they became a job for her, not the music career she wanted.
Yeah, heartbreaking testimony.
He said these freak-offs, they just consumed her time, her energy, her whole being, left no room for her music, made her feel like an obligation, not an artist.
And then her mother, Regina Ventura, testified. That was incredibly powerful corroboration. She spoke very emotionally about Cassie's physical injuries. She actually presented photos of bruises on Cassie from way back in 2011, photos she'd kept for years.
Wow, she kept photos.
She did, meticulously kept them as evidence. Regina also talked about a specific incident in 2016. Diddy allegedly took Cassie's phone, took her car, seemed like trying to control or isolate her. Regina actually called the police herself then. So her testimony was crucial. Showed this alleged pattern of control, isolation, physical abuse. Reinforced Cassie's claims about Diddy trying to dominate her. The defense seemed to sort of concede physical fights might have happened, but argued, okay, that's domestic violence. That's not federal racketeering or sex trafficking. Making that distinction.
Right. But beyond Cassie and her mom, there were other key witnesses trying to build this picture of a pattern, this broader alleged enterprise. Host speaker. Like Mia. We know her pseudonym is Brianna Bigelow. She was a former assistant. Expert speaker, right? She testified about alleged forced labor, painted this picture of extreme control, really demanding behavior. Host speaker, including that infamous spaghetti incident. Expert speaker, yeah 2014. Allegedly threw spaghetti at her, chased her out of her room because she went to the bathroom to change a tampon after working since 8 a.m., bleeding down her leg, then allegedly suspended her without pay. Host speaker. Just incredible. Trying to show that abuse of power over employees. Host speaker. Then there was Jane, identified as alleged victim 2, another ex-girlfriend. Expert speaker. Her testimony was really central to those expanded charges added in April 2025. Count 4, sex trafficking. Count 5, transportation for prostitution. Expert speaker. Her testimony suggested commercial sex. Implied payment of rent was involved. Kind of suggesting an obligation and inducement, not clear consent, which is key for the prosecution. Host speaker. But the defense went after her credibility hard, right? Using her texts. Expert speaker. Oh yeah, very aggressively. We'll get to that. Host speaker. Kid Cudi testified. Scott Mescudi, the rapper, dated Cassie briefly. Expert speaker. Right. He talked about that disturbing incident in 2012. Diddy allegedly breaking into his home, messing with his dog. Host speaker. And this was shortly before Cudi's Porsche was firebombed. Expert speaker. Exactly. And the prosecution connected that. They brought up an email Cassie sent her mom, Regina, mentioning Diddy threatening to harm both her and Kid Cudi. Expert speaker. Plus, they found a car registered to Diddy's company leaving the scene of the fire, trying to link Diddy to the arson as a predicate act for the RSCO charge. Host speaker. Capricorn Clark, another former assistant. Expert speaker. Her testimony was chilling. Alleged Diddy kidnapped her at gunpoint to go confront Kid Cudi. Host speaker. At gunpoint. Expert speaker. That was her allegation. And claimed he threatened to kill Cudi and Cassie if police got involved. Directly supporting witness tampering, kidnapping charges. Expert speaker. She also claimed Diddy ripped up a document showing he owed her $80,000 in overtime, which ties into the forced labor allegations. Host speaker. Then the male escorts. The Punisher, Cherie Hayes, and Daniel Phillips, expert speaker. They testified about the freak-offs with Diddy and Cassie. The Punisher specifically said Diddy recorded them during sex acts, threw money on the bed, said more of this. Expert speaker. This directly supports that transportation for prostitution charge, especially under the Mann Act, where consent isn't a defense if the travel was for illegal sex acts. Host speaker. Right. Expert speaker. And Special Agent Penland testified about Diddy paying for another escort's airfare, Jules Theodore for prostitution, concrete financial records backing that up. Host speaker. And Christina Coram, Diddy's chief of staff for 8 years. His right hand, he called her. Expert speaker. Yeah, and remember Rodney Jones Jr., another accuser? He went even further. Chillingly called her Diddy's Ghislaine Maxwell to Sean Diddy Combs' Epstein. Host speaker. Wow, that's a heavy comparison. Expert speaker. It really is. It implies she wasn't just an assistant, but allegedly a key facilitator, like Maxwell's role with Epstein. Allegedly recruiting, managing, enabling. Expert speaker. Other witnesses, like George Kaplan, testified Coram directed them. Set up hotels, arranged drugs, specifically for the freak-offs. Host speaker, so direct involvement alleged. Expert speaker, very direct. Allegedly present when Eddie Garcia was paid $100,000 cash in a brown paper bag for that hotel surveillance video of Diddy assaulting Cassie.
Host speaker, the bribery and obstruction angle.
Expert speaker, exactly. And allegedly told Cassie how to hide drugs in her luggage. Supporting drug distribution claims within the enterprise, her alleged involvement is wide-ranging, really bolsters the prosecution's claim of an organized criminal operation.
Now, in complete contrast to all this prosecution evidence, the defense, they're painting a totally different picture. Yeah. Their main argument, this is about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money. Complex personal relationships. Okay, not a federal criminal enterprise.
Right.
They've sort of conceded Diddy could be violent personally. They point to the Cassie video. But they argue, okay, he's not charged with being mean. Their core strategy is to separate Diddy's personal behavior, even if it was bad, violent, from the organized criminal activity needed for RICO. They keep insisting his kinky sex, his swinger lifestyle, multiple partners, that was all consensual, not illegal trafficking or coercion. That's where the narratives just completely collide.
And you mentioned they go after witness credibility hard. How are they doing that? Like with Jane, alleged victim 2, you said they used her texts.
Yeah, relentlessly chipping away. With Jane, they presented her own text messages to Diddy. And on the surface, some looked, well, lovey-dovey. Yeah. Messages asking to make love to him, saying she was excited to see other entertainers like Cabra, discussing travel plans for these meetups. Yeah. The defense argued, see, these messages show she was a willing participant. She had agency, directly attacking the prosecution's claim of sex trafficking by fraud. Their goal was to plant doubt. Suggest her actions weren't coerced, maybe part of a complicated relationship, sure. But consensual, undermining the idea she was trafficked.
And what about the staff involvement? How does the defense handle that, since it's key to the enterprise idea?
Right. Strategically, they highlighted what they called mixed messaging about staff knowing what was going on. They argued Diddy actually tried to hide some activities from his staff. They cited texts from him like, I can't have KK know, or hit me when the coast is clear, before escorts showed up.
Trying to show he wasn't openly running a criminal enterprise with them?
Exactly. This argument is crucial for them. It tries to poke holes in that criminal enterprise claim, which really needs staff to knowingly facilitate illegal acts. The defense argued staff like Brendan Paul, Jonathan Perez, they just saw these hotel nights as Diddy's personal arrangements, implying they weren't aware of anything illegal. No common criminal purpose, no knowing participation in a crime. If they can establish that, they argue, the ICO framework starts to fall apart.
And then the big move, Diddy himself is not testifying.
No, not testifying.
And his defense isn't calling any witnesses either.
Correct. No defense witnesses called. Their argument is basically the prosecution didn't prove their case. They claim the cross-examination of the prosecution's witnesses, plus the exhibits already presented, have made our case for them, meaning they believe they've already created enough reasonable doubt.
Wow, that's a bold strategy.
It is. High risk, high reward. It puts everything on the prosecution needing to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt, without the defense offering an alternative narrative through its own witnesses. They're betting entirely on undermining the prosecution's case.
The broader fallout and lingering questions.
So outside the courtroom, the fallout from all this for Sean Diddy Combs has been massive, right? We've seen this really rapid, decisive split. The music industry, businesses, just distancing themselves. I mean, Keisha changing her TikTok lyrics from feeling like P. Diddy to feeling like just me. That was huge.
Very public statement.
And then doubling down at Coachella, saying F. P. Diddy, vowing to keep the change. That kind of public rejection from a peer, it really signals a massive shift in perception.
And it leads to that bigger question, accountability in celebrity culture. How does it work? We saw major brands cut ties almost instantly. Macy's pulling Sean John products, Diddy stepping down from Revolt Media, the company he founded.
Like the business impact.
Huge business impact, but also symbolic. His honorary degree from Howard University, revoked, a really significant blow. Asked to return the key to New York City, Diddy Day in Miami Beach. Canceled.
Wow, didn't know about Diddy Day.
Yeah. It reflects this major cultural and financial reckoning, shows that even immense power, influence, it can evaporate fast when allegations this serious surface. His music airplay, which was everywhere, just plummeted. The industry disengaged very quickly.
And where is Diddy now? As of, say, June 2025.
Still in federal custody, Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. He's been repeatedly denied bail.
Why deny bail?
Serious concerns raised by the prosecution about witness tampering and him being a flight risk. His lawyers have fought hard for his release. They've cited horrific conditions in the jail, bad food, extreme temperatures, chaos. But the judge found evidence. Allegedly, Diddy tried to contact witnesses using other inmates' phones. Allegedly tried to get people to post things online to influence public opinion, maybe taint the jury pool.
Ah, okay. So witness tampering concerns were key.
Directly led to the bail denials, yes, repeatedly.
So, this investigation, it feels so sprawling. Does it stop with Diddy, or could others be implicated?
That's the big lingering question, isn't it? Lots of high-profile names have popped up. In civil suits, in testimony. You hear names like Jennifer Lopez, but that was context from the 1999 nightclub shooting. Cuba Gooding Jr., allegations in Lil Rod's suit, where he allegedly avoided being served papers. Prince Harry was named in a suit, just as someone who attended parties the accuser claimed were used to add legitimacy to alleged illegal activities. Even Jay-Z and Beyoncé mentioned briefly in lawsuits that were later dropped.
So names are out there.
Names are out there, but it is so important to be clear. Being named in a civil suit or mentioned in testimony, that is absolutely not the same as being criminally charged, not even accused of criminal wrongdoing.
Crucial distinction.
Very crucial. The prosecution has been deliberate. They've said the investigation is ongoing. It's not done. That definitely leaves the door open for more developments, maybe more defendants down the line. But right now, no other big names confirmed as targets of the criminal investigation beyond Diddy's immediate circle.
And the trial itself, how long is it expected to last?
Expected to run about 8 weeks in total. Then closing arguments, jury deliberations.
And the stakes. Potential life sentence if convicted on RICO or sex trafficking.
Immense stakes. The jury has an incredibly tough job. Sifting through graphic testimony, tons of digital evidence, complex legal definitions. The verdict, whatever it is, will definitely set a major precedent. How allegations like these against powerful public figures are handled moving forward. Outro. What's really fascinating here, when you step back from the celebrity noise, is how this case just forces us all to grapple with that tangled mess of power, fame, and the justice system. It really challenges how we understand consent, especially when you have these huge power imbalances, allegations of coercion. It shows how incredibly difficult that can be to define, let alone prove, in the real world. And this strategy, using IRO charges against famous people accused of sex offenses like we saw with R. Kelly, Keith Raniere, it signals a big shift. It's about trying to dismantle what's alleged to be an entire criminal operation, not just prosecuting single acts. This case could really set a new, powerful standard for pursuing these kinds of serious claims against public figures.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this?
Well, beyond the headlines and the spectacle, I think this deep dive really highlights something important. The incredible courage it takes for alleged victims to come forward, often years, sometimes decades later, against people with immense power and influence.
Absolutely.
And it also just underscores how complex these legal proceedings are when you're dealing with things this personal, this sensitive, where the lines between consent and coercion get debated so intensely, even when there's a mountain of evidence. It's just a powerful reminder, isn't it, that beneath that glittering surface of fame, wealth, there can be deeply disturbing things hidden. And the search for justice, even decades later, is just this relentless, tough, often painful journey for everyone involved. We really hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, maybe a more profound understanding of the complexities here, the critical insights into the ongoing Sean Diddy Combs trial. What stands out most to you from everything we've talked about today?